The patrol car's lights painted the afternoon in alternating shades of emergency. Red, blue, slicing through the golden September sunlight like accusations. The music died mid-note, a saxophonist's breath catching in his throat. Marcus Chen felt Maya's hand find his. Her fingers trembled against his palm, her ivory wedding dress suddenly too bright, too visible. Around them, 73 guests froze in a tableau of celebration interrupted, champagne glasses suspended halfway to lips. Laughter dissolved into silence. 2 officers emerged from the first patrol car. A second vehicle pulled up behind it, blocking the street. Across the lawn, past the white lattice archway still wrapped in lavender and cream roses, past the tables set with gold-rimmed china, Marcus saw her. Carol Brennan stood on her porch, arms crossed over her chest, phone still clutched in one hand. Her face held the expression of someone who'd just done her civic duty. The older officer, Patterson, Marcus recognized from his nameplate even at this distance, scanned the crowd with the mechanical assessment of 20 years on the job. His partner, younger, looked confused. His eyes moved from the wedding cake to the formal attire to the string quartet's abandoned instruments. Maya's mother began to cry. Soft sounds, barely audible. Marcus's uncle put a protective hand on his wife's shoulder. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Someone's child asked a question in a whisper. No one answered. Marcus's badge sat in his jacket pocket 5 feet away, draped over a chair inside the house. He wore only his tuxedo now, the bow tie Maya had straightened an hour ago, the cufflinks his father had worn at his own wedding. He looked, he knew, like exactly what Carol Brennan had called 911 to report. Suspicious. Patterson's hand rested near his belt. Standard protocol. Non-threatening but ready. Marcus had taught that stance to a dozen rookies. His chest tightened as he calculated the next 60 seconds and all the ways they could splinter into tragedy. Then he stepped forward. Hands visible. Movement slow. Every instinct from 20 years of training and a lifetime before that, screaming the same instructions. Comply. De-escalate, survive. 3 hours earlier, Marcus had stood before a different mirror in a different room, adjusting this same bow tie with steady fingers. The house still smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. Sunlight streamed through windows that overlooked a backyard transformed overnight into something from Maya's Pinterest boards. He'd studied his reflection, 38 years old, decorated sheriff's deputy, finally standing in a home he owned in a neighborhood he'd earned access to. The mirror showed a man in a tuxedo, but Marcus saw the accumulation of every choice that had brought him here. The late night studying for sergeant's exam, the community outreach programs, the recommendation letters, the perfect credit score. Maya appeared in the doorway behind him, breaking tradition because they'd never been traditional anyway. Her dress caught the light and Marcus forgot how to breathe. 7 years together and she still did that to him. You're thinking too much, she said, reading him the way she always could. She crossed to him, fixed his collar, though it didn't need fixing. Today is ours. Nothing else matters. He kissed her forehead, careful not to disturb her makeup. Nothing else matters, he repeated, trying to believe it. Outside, the neighborhood hummed with Saturday afternoon normalcy. Lawns manicured to identical heights, SUVs in driveways, the occasional dog walker. They'd moved in 6 months ago. The first black family on Maple Ridge Drive. The first Asian family, too. Marcus's mother's heritage claiming space in a subdivision that had never seen anyone who looked like them. Most neighbors had been polite. Some had been warm. Carol Brennan, directly across the street, had been neither. She'd watched them move in with the vigilance of a border guard, her stare following every box, every piece of furniture, every visiting family member. Marcus had waved once. She'd turned away. Ignore her, Maya had said then. We belong here as much as anyone. Now in their bedroom, Maya spun once, dress flaring. How do I look? Like everything I don't deserve, Marcus answered honestly. She laughed, the sound filling spaces his worry had tried to claim. Downstairs, voices rose in happy chaos. Maya's sisters arguing about centerpieces. Marcus's best man, Jerome, probably already sampling the catered food. His mother directing traffic with the authority of a woman who'd raised 4 sons and wasn't about to let a wedding descend into disorder. The backyard had been transformed. White chairs arranged in perfect rows faced an archway woven with flowers. String lights crisscrossed overhead waiting for sunset. Tables draped in gold cloth held arrangements of lavender and cream roses, Maya's grandmother's favorite colors. The caterer had arrived at dawn. The DJ was setting up near the house. Everything choreographed, everything planned, everything perfect. Marcus checked his watch. 2 hours until the ceremony. His badge and gun sat locked in the bedroom safe. Today he wasn't Deputy Chen. He was just Marcus, marrying the woman who'd seen past the uniform to the man underneath. He heard his father's voice in memory. "The uniform doesn't make you safe, son. It makes you a target or a tool depending on who's looking." His father had never lived to see Marcus make deputy. Heart attack at 53, stress-induced years of hypervigilance finally claiming their price. Marcus pushed the thought away. Today was about joy, about building something his father would have been proud of, about proving that the dream could work, that he could wear the badge and live the life and love the woman and exist in this neighborhood without apology. Maya took his hand. "Stop," she whispered. "I can hear you thinking from here." He smiled, meaning it this time. "I'm good. We're good. We're better than good," she corrected. "We're everything." Outside, car doors slammed. Guests arriving early. Laughter drifted through windows. His mother called his name, some last-minute crisis needing his attention. Maya kissed his cheek and disappeared to find her sisters. Marcus took one last look at himself in the mirror. Today, he decided, nothing would go wrong. Today, in this neighborhood, on this lawn, surrounded by everyone who mattered, he would just be happy. The universe, as it turned out, had different plans. The ceremony was flawless. Maya walked down the aisle on her father's arm, while Marcus forgot how to breathe a second time. His mother cried. Jerome handed over the rings without dropping them. The officiant's words wrapped around them like a blessing. And when Marcus kissed his wife, 73 people erupted in applause that scared birds from nearby trees. The reception began with controlled chaos. Guests mingled across the lawn, a beautiful collision of cultures and colors. Marcus's police academy friends traded stories with Maya's hospital colleagues. His cousins taught her nephews complicated handshakes. Music swelled from speakers, a mix of R&B, jazz, and the Korean pop Maya's mother loved. Laughter rose and fell like waves. Carol Brennan's curtains twitched at 3:47 p.m. Marcus noticed but dismissed it. He was dancing with Maya, her head against his chest, the world reduced to the space they occupied. Jerome was attempting to flirt with Maya's sister. The caterers circulated with appetizers. His uncle had commandeered the grill for some reason, arguing with the hired staff about proper rib technique. Everything was exactly as chaotic and perfect as they'd hoped. At 4:15, the music shifted to something up-tempo. The DJ, Marcus's cousin's boyfriend, doing them a favor, cranked the volume. Not excessively, not violation level, just celebration loud. People moved to the makeshift dance floor. Children ran between tables. Someone started a Soul Train line. Across the street, Carol Brennan stepped onto her porch. She was 63, retired, recently widowed. Marcus knew this because Maya had attempted to be neighborly, bringing cookies at Christmas. Carol had accepted them at the door but never invited her inside. Never returned the plate. Never waved when Maya worked in their garden. Now Carol's face held something harder than disapproval. She surveyed the scene with pursed lips. The cars lining both sides of Maple Ridge Drive, the unfamiliar faces, the volume of joy happening without her permission. Her jaw worked like she was chewing something bitter. She pulled out her phone. Marcus didn't see it happen. He was inside, grabbing more ice. when Carol dialed 911. He didn't hear her voice, clipped and certain, explaining the situation to the dispatcher. "There's some kind of gathering at 847 Maple Ridge Drive," Carol said, her tone suggesting she was reporting a crime in progress. "Lots of cars blocking the street. Lots of people I've never seen before. The music is excessive, so I think they might be trespassing. The house was just sold recently, and I'm not sure the new owners authorized this. It looks suspicious. You should send someone to check it out." The dispatcher asked clarifying questions. Carol's answers grew more insistent. "I know what I'm seeing. This isn't normal for our neighborhood. Just send a patrol car, please. For everyone's safety." She emphasized those last three words, like a threat wrapped in concern. The call logged at 4:22 p.m. to patrol. Units were dispatched at 4:26 standard. Response time for a disturbance call in a quiet suburb. No urgency, but protocol demanded investigation. Marcus emerged from the house carrying an ice bucket, laughing at something Jerome had just said. The sun painted everything gold. Maya was dancing with her father. His mother was taking approximately 1,000 photos. The wedding cake stood pristine on its table, waiting for the ceremonial cutting. At 4:34 p.m., the first patrol car turned onto Maple Ridge Drive. The saxophonist saw it first. The music faltered, his breath catching mid-phrase. Conversation stuttered into silence. Heads turned. Children stopped running. The DJ's finger hovered over the pause button, uncertain. Red and blue lights activated. Marcus's ice bucket slipped from his hands. Cubes scattered across grass. The sound of them hitting the ground seemed impossibly loud in the sudden quiet. Every eye found him, waiting, watching, wondering what he would do. Patterson and Rodriguez emerged from their vehicles. Standard procedure. Hands near belts, eyes scanning. Marcus recognized the assessment happening in real time. Crowd size, potential threat level, escape routes, demographics, especially demographics. Carol Brennan remained on her porch, arms crossed, vindicated. She'd called the authorities. She'd done her part. Now they would handle these people who'd invaded her street, with their noise and their celebration, and their audacity to exist in her sightline. Maya's hand found Marcus's shoulder. She'd crossed the lawn in seconds, her dress whispering against grass. "Marcus," she breathed. Just his name, but it held everything. Fear, confusion, rage, heartbreak. Patterson's voice carried across the lawn, professional and neutral. "We received a call about a disturbance. Can someone tell me what's going on here?" The question hung in the air like smoke. 73 people held their breath. Marcus's uncle's hand tightened on his wife's shoulder. Maya's father stepped protectively toward his daughter. The children, sensing tension they didn't understand, pressed against their parents' legs, and Marcus, standing in his tuxedo on his wedding day in his own backyard, felt the weight of history settle across his shoulders like a familiar, hated coat. He had two choices, comply and explain and hope, or assert and risk and demand the respect he'd earned. His badge was still inside. 5 feet and a lifetime away, he looked at Carol Brennan. She looked back, unblinking, certain. Then Marcus stepped forward, hands visible, toward the officers he'd trained and worked beside and bled with, preparing to prove he had the right to celebrate his own wedding, on his own property in his own neighborhood. Time fractured into fragments. Marcus moved through air that felt suddenly thick, each step toward the officers measured and deliberate. Behind him, Maya's sharp inhale cut through the silence. He didn't turn around. Couldn't. If he looked at her face, at the joy they'd been building all day now crumbling, he might not keep walking. Patterson's hand stayed near his belt. Rodriguez, Marcus had trained him, had taught him about de-escalation and community trust, stood 3 feet behind his partner, face carefully neutral. But Marcus saw the recognition flash in his eyes, the complicated calculus happening behind that neutral expression. Duty versus loyalty, versus the impossible situation unfolding. Marcus's mind supplied 1,000 headlines he'd read, 1,000 names he'd memorized. Philando Castile reaching for his license, John Crawford holding a toy gun in Walmart, Elijah McClain walking home with groceries. The list went on, endless and devastating. Each one a moment like this, a black man, a misunderstanding, an assumption that proved fatal. He was a deputy. He knew the statistics. He'd sat through the training that was supposed to prevent these moments. He'd even helped write some of those protocols. And still here he stood, having to prove his humanity to men who wore the same uniform hanging in his closet. His father's voice echoed, "Being right won't save you, son. Being careful might." Maya's presence behind him felt like a prayer and an anchor. 7 years together, she'd warned him about this neighborhood, about moving somewhere so white, so insulated, so historically unwelcoming to people who looked like them. He'd insisted they'd earned it, that their jobs and their credit and their worth would speak for themselves. Now his badge sat inside, and out here he was just another black man at a gathering that made a white woman nervous. The silence stretched. Guests watched with the frozen attention of people who knew this moment's importance, but felt powerless to change its trajectory. Marcus's uncle, who'd been pulled over 17 times in 3 years, who taught Marcus how to keep his hands visible and his voice even, stood rigid, preparing to witness history repeat itself. A child whimpered. Someone shushed them gently. Patterson opened his mouth to speak, to ask his questions, to follow protocol that would require Marcus to justify his existence in his own backyard. And Marcus made his choice. Not compliance, not yet. First, he would make sure everyone saw exactly what was happening here. He stopped 10 feet from the officers, hands still visible, shoulders straight. He met Patterson's eyes with the authority of a man who'd earned his badge through excellence, not favors, and he waited for them to ask the questions they'd never ask a white groom at his own wedding. Marcus's father had been pulled over 17 times in 3 years. Marcus had counted, documenting each incident in a notebook he still kept in his desk drawer. License and registration. Step out of the vehicle. Any weapons in the car? Where are you coming from? Where are you headed? Never speeding. Never broken taillights. Just driving while black in neighborhoods where his presence triggered suspicion. His father had never grown bitter. This amazed Marcus even now, standing in his own crisis, remembering the man who'd raised him. After each stop, his father would sit at their kitchen table, still wearing his pharmacy technician uniform, and breathe deeply until his hands stopped shaking. Then he'd smile at Marcus and his brothers and say, "That's why you boys are going to do better, smarter, higher, so they can't pretend they don't see you." Marcus had taken that lesson to heart. Valedictorian of his high school. Criminal justice degree. Police academy where he'd graduated top of his class. He'd done everything right, collected every credential, built a record so clean it gleamed. His personnel file read like a hero's resume. 3 commendations for bravery, 2 community service awards, flawless performance reviews. He mentored at-risk youth on weekends. He coached basketball at the Boys and Girls Club. He'd given the city 14 years of exemplary service, and his father had died before seeing any of it. Stress-induced heart attack at 53. The doctor had been clinical. Hypertension, probably genetic, possibly preventable with lifestyle changes. Marcus knew better. He'd read the studies about the toll of constant vigilance, about how discrimination literally shortened lifespans, about how his father's body had kept the score of every traffic stop, every suspicious glance, every moment of having to prove he belonged. His mother had pressed his father's badge, from a brief stint as a security officer, the closest he'd gotten to law enforcement, into Marcus's hand at the funeral. "Be the change," she'd whispered. "Show them who we are." Marcus had carried that badge through the academy. On his worst days, when instructors questioned his judgment or his colleagues made jokes they claimed weren't racist, He'd felt its weight in his pocket. Reminder and talisman. Proof that the dream was possible if you just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, proved yourself enough. He'd proposed to Maya on the anniversary of his father's death. Deliberate timing, claiming joy on a day that had only held grief. She'd said yes with tears streaming down her face. Understanding everything, he couldn't articulate about legacy and hope, and building something his father would have been proud of. The house on Maple Ridge Drive had represented the culmination. They'd saved for 5 years. Maya worked double shifts at the hospital. Marcus took every overtime opportunity. They'd toured 17 houses before finding this one. 4 bedrooms, a backyard perfect for the children they hoped to have, a neighborhood with good schools and safe streets. The mortgage broker had seemed surprised when their application sailed through. Perfect credit, stable employment, down payment exceeding requirements, as if she'd expected them to fail some invisible test. Moving day, his mother had walked through every room, touching walls, crying softly. "Your father would have loved this," she'd said. He would have been so proud. Marcus had believed it then. Believed the system worked if you worked within it. Believed the badge meant something. Believed excellence transcended prejudice. Now standing in his tuxedo with patrol cars painting his wedding in emergency colors, he felt the full weight of that belief crumbling. He'd done everything right, checked every box, earned every credential. And Carol Brennan had still looked at his wedding and seen criminality, had still called 911 and reported suspicious activity, had still reduced his achievement to threat. His father's voice, "The uniform doesn't make you safe, son. It makes you a target or a tool depending on who's looking." Without his badge visible, Marcus was just another black man who made white people nervous. With his badge, he became a tool she could weaponize, calling in his own colleagues to police his existence. Patterson's hand stayed near his belt. Standard procedure. Marcus had taught that stance, had explained about sight lines and reaction time, and the split-second decisions that could save a life or end one. Now that training was being used to assess his threat level at his own wedding. He thought of the couples at the academy who'd graduated the same day. White couples who'd bought homes in better neighborhoods with worse credit, who'd never had to document traffic stops, who'd never felt their hearts race during routine interactions, who'd never had to explain to their children why being excellent wasn't enough. Maya squeezed his hand one more time, then released it. He felt her step back, giving him space to do whatever needed doing. His brothers tensed, ready to support or intervene. His mother's lips moved in silent prayer, and Marcus made his decision. Not just for himself. For his father who died proving himself. For Maya who deserved to celebrate without fear. For every black family who'd tried to build a life in a neighborhood that viewed their presence as invasion. He would show Carol Brennan and everyone, watching, exactly who she'd called the police. On Marcus's voice when he spoke, carried the authority he'd earned over 14 years. This is my home. This is my wedding. Simple words, declarative. But Carol Brennan's face shifted, confusion flickering before defensiveness hardened into something uglier. She stepped off her porch, emboldened by the patrol cars, by the validation of her suspicions being taken seriously. Well, how was I supposed to know that? Her voice carried across the lawn, shrill with self-righteousness. "Are you people just moved in, and suddenly there's all this—" She gestured vaguely at the celebration, at the guests, at the visible joy she'd interrupted. "Activity. Cars everywhere, noise, people I've never seen. This is a quiet neighborhood. We have standards. You people." The words hung in the air like a slap. Maya's father took a step forward. Jerome's hand shot out, restraining him. Marcus saw the calculation in his best man's eyes. Let this play out, don't escalate, trust Marcus to handle it. But Jerome's jaw was clenched so tight, Marcus could see the muscle jumping. Patterson's expression shifted. Something that might have been recognition or shame or the dawning understanding that this wasn't a disturbance call. This was something else entirely. He glanced at Rodriguez, a silent communication passing between them. Carol continued, feeding on her own momentum, the words pouring out like poison, finally given permission to spread. I have a right to call the police when I see something suspicious. That's what we do here. That's how we keep our property values up, how we keep the neighborhood safe. We can't just let anyone— She stopped herself, but too late. The implication bloomed in the silence. Anyone like you— Marcus's mother made a sound low in her throat. Maya's sister pulled her niece close, covering the child's ears. The guests stood frozen, witnessing something they'd all experienced in different forms, but had hoped wouldn't intrude here, not today, not at a wedding. Rodriguez finally spoke, his voice tight. Ma'am, did you tell dispatch you suspected trespassing? Carol bristled. I said it was suspicious. I said they might not belong here. She caught herself again, some survival instinct finally activating. She looked between the officers and Marcus, calculating. I was just being cautious. Anyone would have done the same. No, Maya said quietly, stepping forward despite Marcus's silent plea for her to stay back. No, they wouldn't have. If we were white, would you have called? If this were the Henderson's daughter's graduation party, would you have reported it? The question sliced clean and deep. Carol's face flushed. This isn't about— You're twisting my words. We're twisting nothing, Maya's father said, his voice carrying decades of barely restrained rage. We're just translating. You saw black folks celebrating and decided we were criminals. That's what happened here. That's what you need to own. Patterson cleared his throat, professional again, trying to salvage something from this disaster. He paused, realizing he didn't have a name, hadn't asked, had been prepared to interrogate first and identify later. Chen, Marcus supplied. Deputy Marcus Chen, Sheriff's Department, Narcotics Division. I live here. I own this house, and I'm getting married today. Or I was, before my neighbor decided my wedding was a crime scene. The words landed like grenades. Rodriguez went rigid. Patterson's hand finally dropped from his belt, his face draining of color. They both turned to Carol, whose expression had cycled from defensive to confused to horrified, as she processed what Marcus had just said. Deputy. Not a suspect. Not a trespasser. Their colleague. Their superior, given Marcus's rank and years of service. Carol's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. She looked between Marcus and the officers, finally understanding the magnitude of her mistake. Not just that she'd been wrong about the gathering, but about who she'd been judging, who she'd weaponized the police against. Marcus reached into his jacket. The movement was slow, deliberate, but Patterson still tensed, trained reflexes overriding conscious thought. Marcus maintained eye contact as his fingers found the leather badge holder he'd placed in his inside pocket that morning. Just in case, always just in case, he withdrew it slowly, flipped it open. The sheriff's star caught the late afternoon sunlight, gleaming gold against black leather. His photo ID sat beside it, official and indisputable. Badge number 2847, Deputy Marcus Chen, 14 years of service. 3 commendations, exemplary record, the badge that was supposed to protect him, the badge that his father had dreamed of him earning, the badge that should have made him safe, but instead served as the final proof of Carol Brennan's prejudice. She'd seen a black man in a tuxedo surrounded by black and Asian guests and assumed criminality so reflexively that not even the possibility of legitimacy had entered her mind. Rodriguez exhaled slowly, his shoulders dropping. Patterson's face had gone from flushed to pale. They both knew what this meant, what this call would look like in the report, how it would reflect on them, how close they'd come to creating an incident that would have destroyed careers and lives and maybe sparked riots. And Carol Brennan, still standing on the street in her sensible shoes and her judgment, finally understood that she'd just tried to weaponize law enforcement against law enforcement. against a man with more authority than the officers she'd summoned, against someone who could, if he chose, make this mistake cost her in ways she was only beginning to comprehend. The silence stretched, thick and damning. 73 witnesses, 2 body cameras recording. A wedding turned into evidence. Joy transformed into yet another data point in the long, exhausting history of being black in America. Marcus held the badge steady, letting everyone see it. Letting Carol see it, letting his colleagues see their own complicity in responding without question to a white woman's suspicions about black celebration. "So," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the rage and heartbreak churning beneath, "are we still suspicious, Officer Patterson? Or can I get back to marrying my wife?" Patterson's voice came out strained. "Deputy Chen, we didn't know. The call came in as a disturbance, possible trespassing. We were just responding to a white woman's complaint about black people celebrating," Marcus finished, his voice even, "about us existing too loudly in her sightline. That's what you responded to." Rodriguez stepped forward, face tight with something between shame and solidarity. "Marcus, man, I'm sorry. If we'd known—" "If you'd known what?" Marcus cut him off. "You would have ignored the call. You would have questioned why a wedding looked suspicious? Or would you have come anyway, just more carefully, because that's protocol?" He paused, letting the questions settle. "Don't apologize for doing your job. Question why your job required you to investigate my wedding in the first place." Carol's voice, smaller now, tried to reclaim ground. "I was just being cautious. With everything you hear on the news these days about crime rates, about—" She caught herself again, but the damage kept spreading. Maya moved to Marcus's side, her presence a statement. "About us?" she asked quietly. "About people who look like us? Is that what you hear on the news, Carol? That we're dangerous when we're getting married? That our joy is suspicious?" Carol's face worked through several expressions. Defensiveness, embarrassment, anger at being challenged. She settled on righteous indignation. "I don't have to justify myself to you. I saw something unusual, I called. That's my right as a homeowner in this neighborhood." "It is your right," Marcus agreed, his voice still controlled. "Just like it's my right to file a formal complaint about harassment based on racial profiling. Just like it's my right to have our body cam footage reviewed by Internal Affairs. Just like it's my right to make sure every officer in this county knows that calls from this address require extra scrutiny because the complainant has demonstrated bias." Patterson and Rodriguez exchanged glances. The threat was clear and legitimate. A deputy filing a racial profiling complaint against a civilian would trigger investigations, reviews, potential consequences for everyone involved. Carol paled. "That's not— You're overreacting. I made an honest mistake." "An honest mistake," Marcus repeated flatly. "You looked at my wedding and saw crime. You looked at my guests and saw threat. You called armed officers to investigate Joy. That's not a mistake, Carol. That's a choice, and choices have consequences." The wedding guests remained frozen, watching justice or something like it unfold in real time. Maya's father had his arm around her mother, whose tears had stopped, but whose face held an expression Marcus recognized. Exhausted resignation mixed with faint hope that maybe, this time, something would change. Patterson cleared his throat. "Deputy Chen will need to file a report. Given the circumstances, I think it's appropriate to document the nature of the call and the false report," Marcus supplied. "The baseless accusation. The waste of department resources. Call it what it is, Patterson." "Yes, sir," Patterson said quietly. The sir hung in the air, acknowledgement of rank, of authority Marcus had always possessed, but Carol had never imagined. Carol backed toward her house, her earlier certainty crumbling. "I didn't mean— This isn't what I— You're making this into something it's not." "No," Maya said firmly. "You did that. You saw us and decided we didn't belong. You looked at our home and called it suspicious. You tried to use police to enforce your prejudice. We're just naming what happened. The standoff balanced on a knife's edge. Marcus could push, could file official complaints, trigger investigations, make this Carol's defining moment. Or he could let it go, return to his wedding, pretend the interruption was minor. The choice sat heavy in his chest. Jerome approached slowly, placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Brother," he said quietly, "what do you need?" What did he need? Justice? Vindication? Consequences? Or just to marry his wife without this moment, poisoning every memory of their wedding day? Marcus looked at his guests, his family, his colleagues, his friends, all waiting to see what came next. He looked at Maya, whose expression held no judgment, only support for whatever he decided. He looked at his mother, who'd spent decades teaching him to pick his battles, to survive first and resist second. Then he looked at Carol Brennan, whose fear was finally visible beneath her righteousness. Who would go inside, close her curtains, and probably convince herself she'd done nothing wrong? Who would tell her friends she'd been attacked, harassed, threatened? Who would learn nothing, or maybe she would. Maybe shame would plant seeds that would eventually grow into understanding. Marcus had seen it happen before, though rarely. Had watched prejudice crack when confronted with consequences. He made his choice. Not mercy, strategy. Marcus lowered his badge but didn't put it away. He held Carol's gaze until she looked away first. A small victory that felt hollow. "Officers, file your report accurately. Every detail. I'll be reviewing it tomorrow. For now you can clear the call." Patterson nodded, relief visible. "Yes, sir. Again, Marcus raised a hand, stopping the apology. "Just go, please." They retreated to their vehicles, body cameras still recording. The lights finally cut off, returning the afternoon to normal colors. The patrol cars backed out, disappeared down the street, and Carol Brennan stood alone on her porch, isolated by her own making. Before finally fleeing inside, the silence that followed their departure felt different than before. Heavier, weighted with everything unsaid. Marcus turned to his guests. 73 faces looked back, expressions ranging from anger to sorrow to the particular exhaustion that came from witnessing familiar trauma. This was supposed to be a celebration. Now it was evidence. Now it was another story they'd retell. Another example of how excellence didn't protect you, how joy could be criminalized, how being black meant constantly proving your right to exist. Maya's hand found his, squeezed once. He squeezed back but couldn't find words. His uncle broke the silence. "Well, that was some white nonsense." A few uncomfortable laughs. The tension cracked slightly, but the damage was done. Marcus felt it in his bones, the way this moment would overshadow every wedding memory. How they'd always remember the patrol cars more than the vows. How Carol Brennan's prejudice had claimed space in what should have been theirs alone. The DJ looked uncertain. The caterers waited for direction. The wedding cake sat untouched, a monument to interrupted joy. Children clung to their parents, confused by the adult tension they'd witnessed but couldn't fully understand. Marcus's mother approached, cupped his face in her hands the way she had when he was young. "You did good, baby. Your father would be proud, would he? Or would his father see this as proof that nothing really changed? That the uniform Marcus wore was just another costume white people would ignore when it suited them? That all the respectability politics, all the excellence, all the playing by the rules still ended with patrol cars at your wedding?" Maya leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her waist. His wife. They'd said their vows hours ago before the interruption. Legally married now, officially bound. But the celebration felt poisoned. "What do we do?" Maya whispered. Marcus didn't have an answer. The playbook for recovering from this didn't exist. No training manual covered resume wedding celebration after racist neighbor calls cops on you. He looked around at his guests, at the decorations still perfect, at the food going cold, at the dancing that had stopped. He could send everyone home. Could end this now, preserve what dignity remained. Or he could do what his father never got to do, reclaim the joy that someone had tried to steal. The choice sat heavy and impossible in his chest. Jerome's voice cut through the silence. "Yo, DJ, play something." The DJ hesitated, looking to Marcus for permission. Marcus nodded once, a small movement that felt enormous. Music flooded back, not the same up-tempo celebration from before, but something softer. A ballad. An invitation rather than a demand. "We're not letting her win," Jerome said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We're not letting that woman steal this day. Marcus and Maya got married today. That's what matters. That's what we're celebrating." Slowly, tentatively, the wedding began to resurrect itself. Maya's sister retrieved champagne glasses. His uncle returned to the grill, deliberately casual. Conversations restarted, quiet at first, then gradually building. The children, resilient in the way children are, returned to running between tables. But Marcus couldn't shake the weight. He pulled Maya aside, behind the house where they could speak privately. The music faded to background noise. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" Maya's eyes flashed. "You didn't do anything wrong. She did. Carol did that. I brought us here, to this neighborhood. I insisted we belonged, that we'd earned it, that—" His voice cracked. "I thought the badge would matter. I thought if I was good enough, worked hard enough, proved myself enough—" "Marcus." Maya took his face in her hands the way his mother had. "Listen to me. You did everything right. You are everything right. What happened today isn't about you. It's about her. Her fear, her prejudice, her failure to see us as human. But my father," Marcus started. "Your father would be proud," Maya interrupted firmly. "Not because you have a badge or a house or a perfect record. Because you stood there with dignity. Because you didn't let her reduce you. Because you're still here, still fighting, still choosing joy even when they try to criminalize it." Marcus leaned into her touch, letting himself absorb her certainty. She'd always been his anchor, the one who saw clearly when his vision blurred with rage or doubt. "I wanted today to be perfect," he admitted. "Perfect doesn't exist," Maya said, "but real does. And this, us here together, married despite everything trying to stop us, this is real. This is ours. Don't let her take that." A sound made them turn. Rodriguez stood at the corner of the house, body language apologetic. "Sorry to interrupt. Marcus, man, I need you to know I'm filing a supplemental report about the nature of the call, about the complainant's statements. It won't change what happened, but it'll be on record." Marcus studied his former trainee. Rodriguez looked young suddenly, uncomfortable in his uniform, wrestling with the same questions Marcus had wrestled with for 14 years. Can you change the system from inside? Or does the system change you? "Thanks," Marcus said finally. "That matters," Rodriguez nodded, retreated. Maya watched him go, then turned back to Marcus. "You taught him that. To document, to speak up. That's change, Marcus. Slow, painful, inadequate change. But change, Marcus wanted to believe her. Wanted to see this moment as progress, rather than another data point in an endless pattern. He thought of his father's notebook, 17 traffic stops documented in neat handwriting. His own daughter, when he had one, would she keep a similar notebook? Would she document wedding interruptions, suspicious neighbor calls, moments of being presumed criminal? Or would something have shifted by then? Would Rodriguez's supplemental reports accumulate into policy changes? Would enough Carol Brennans face enough consequences that the next black family wouldn't have their joy interrupted? Maya kissed him, soft and certain. "Come back to our wedding," she whispered. "Come back to me. We'll fight tomorrow. Today we celebrate. She was right. She was always right." Marcus took her hand, let her lead him back around the house to the backyard where 73 people waited to see if he would reclaim this day or let prejudice win. The music swelled as they appeared. His mother smiled, tears on her cheeks. Jerome raised a champagne glass. Maya's father nodded approval. And Marcus made his second choice of the day. He pulled Maya into the center of the makeshift dance floor, wrapped his arms around his wife, and began to dance. One by one, their guests joined them. The celebration rebuilt itself, more defiant now, more deliberate. They would finish this wedding. They would cut the cake and toast the couple, and dance until sunset. They would prove that joy could survive attempted theft. And Carol Brennan, behind her curtains, would have to watch them celebrate, despite her best efforts to stop them. The celebration had reclaimed its rhythm when Carol's door opened again. Marcus saw it first, the flicker of movement across the street. His body tensed automatically, prepared for round two. But Carol wasn't alone. A man emerged behind her. Late 60s, grey hair, expensive golf shirt. He took in the scene, the wedding, the guests, the celebration that refused to die, with an expression Marcus couldn't read. Then he started across the street. Jerome moved to intercept, but Marcus raised a hand. "Let him come." The man approached slowly, hands visible, body language deliberate. He stopped a respectful distance from Marcus and Maya. Up close, Marcus saw the exhaustion in his face, the particular weariness of someone carrying uncomfortable truths. "Deputy Chen," the man said. "I'm Richard Brennan. Carol's brother." He paused, gathering words. "I came as soon as she called me. Took me 40 minutes to get here. She told me what happened." Marcus waited, giving nothing. Richard continued, each word seeming to cost him. "My sister is wrong. What she did was wrong. And I told her so." He glanced back at Carol's house, where curtains twitched. "Our parents, they raised us in a different time. Different values. Not an excuse, just context. Carol's been alone since Bill died. She's afraid of change. Of the neighborhood changing. Of getting older and losing control of the only world she knows. None of that justifies what she did," Maya said quietly. "No," Richard agreed. "It doesn't, but maybe it explains." He pulled something from his pocket, a folded check, extended it toward Marcus. "For the wedding. For the interruption. He stopped. "It's not enough. Money never is. But it's something." Marcus didn't take it. "I don't want your money." "I know. But let me do something, please." Richard's voice cracked. "I watched the body cam footage. Rodriguez sent it to me. We go way back. His dad and I worked together. I saw what my sister said. What she implied. How she tried to weaponize your own colleagues against you." He paused. "I'm ashamed of her. Of not doing more to challenge her views over the years. He stopped again, overwhelmed. Maya surprised Marcus by taking the check. "Thank you," she said simply. "For acknowledging what happened. For not making excuses." Richard nodded, relief visible. Then he pulled out his phone, pulled up something, showed it to Marcus. "I also did this. It was a Facebook post, public, posted 15 minutes ago. In it, Richard described what Carol had done, naming it clearly. Racial profiling. He apologized publicly, called for accountability, and announced he'd be making a donation to the NACP in Marcus and Maya's name. "It's not enough," Richard repeated, "but it's a start. Carol needs to understand that her actions have consequences, that I won't enable her prejudice anymore, that the family won't protect her from the truth of what she did." Marcus studied the post. 300 shares already. Comments piling up. Some supportive, some defensive, some arguing that Richard was betraying family. He looked up at Richard, saw the genuine distress in the older man's face. "What about Carol?" Marcus asked. "Has she learned anything?" Richard's expression darkened. "She's still claiming she was just being cautious, still insisting you're overreacting. But," he glanced back at the house, "but she's scared now. Scared of consequences. Scared of people knowing what she did. Maybe that fear will eventually transform into something better. Understanding, growth, I don't know. But I'm done protecting her from reality." A woman appeared in Carol's doorway, younger, maybe 40, with Carol's features. She crossed the street quickly, face flushed with emotion. "Deputy Chen, I'm Sarah, Carol's daughter. I just heard what happened and She stopped, fighting tears. "I'm so sorry. This is inexcusable. My mother," she shook her head. "I've been trying for years to get her to see how her views hurt people. I thought she was getting better. But today proved—" She couldn't finish. Marcus felt the shift happening. What had been a private violation now becoming public reckoning. Carol's own family standing in his yard, apologizing, acknowledging, refusing to enable. It didn't erase what happened. Didn't restore the joy Carol had stolen. But it was something. "I want to press charges," Sarah said suddenly. "False report, harassment, whatever's appropriate. I'll testify. I'll make sure this has real consequences, not just symbolic ones." Richard nodded agreement. "We both will. Carol needs to understand she can't act with impunity. That racism has costs." The wedding guests had gone quiet again, watching this unexpected development. Marcus looked at Maya, silently asking her opinion. She squeezed his hand. "Your choice, whatever you decide." Marcus thought of his father's notebook. 17 traffic stops, no consequences for any of them. Complaints filed, investigations promised, nothing changed. The same cycle repeating across generations. What would actually create change? Charges against Carol, public shaming, or her own family refusing to enable her, forcing her to face what she'd done. "Here's what I want," Marcus said slowly. "Carol comes out here, apologizes publicly to every guest, acknowledges specifically what she did wrong. Not 'I'm sorry if you were offended,' but 'I made assumptions based on race and I was wrong.' Then she makes a donation matching Richard's to an organization working on racial justice. And," he paused, "and she attends cultural competency training. Real training, not some online video." Sarah nodded eagerly. "I can arrange that. I work with several programs that—" "One more thing," Marcus interrupted. "She writes an op-ed for the local paper, explaining what happened and what she learned, making it clear that what she did was racial profiling, owning it publicly." Richard winced but nodded. "I'll make sure she does it, all of it. And if she refuses, then we press charges," Maya finished, "and file civil complaints. And make sure everyone in this county knows what she did." "Agreed," Richard said. He turned toward Carol's house, gestured. "Carol, come out here now." Carol emerged slowly, face blotchy from crying, body language defeated. She crossed the street like she was walking to execution. Sarah took her elbow, propelling her forward when she hesitated. They reached Marcus and Maya. Carol couldn't meet their eyes. Her hands twisted together, knuckles white. "Say it," Sarah commanded. "What we discussed." Carol's voice came out barely audible. "I'm sorry." Louder, Richard said. "And be specific. These people deserve real words." Carol flinched, drew a shaky breath, raised her voice. "I'm sorry. I made assumptions based on your race. I saw black people celebrating and decided you were criminals. I was wrong. Her voice cracked. "I called the police on your wedding because I'm a racist. I didn't think I was." But that's what racism is. Making judgments based on skin color. And that's what I did. The silence was absolute. Every guest heard every word. The admission hung in the air like smoke. Maya spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "Do you understand what you took from us today? The fear you caused? The trauma you inflicted?" Carol nodded, tears streaming now. "I didn't think... I thought I was just being careful. But I see it now, what my assumptions mean. What they do to people." She looked up, finally meeting Marcus's eyes. "I took your joy. I criminalized your celebration. I used police as weapons against you. And I'm deeply, truly sorry." Marcus studied her face, looking for performance versus genuine understanding. He'd seen both enough times to usually tell the difference. Carol looked broken. Whether that brokenness would transform into growth or just harden into resentment remained to be seen. "Apology noted," Marcus said carefully. "Now follow through. Do the work. Learn. Change. Because next time, if there's a next time, there won't be second chances. Carol nodded, wiped her face. I will, I promise. She turned to address the crowd. I'm sorry to all of you for interrupting, for my prejudice, for... She couldn't continue. Sarah led her back toward the house. Richard remained. Thank you for giving her a chance to make this right. Most people wouldn't. Most people don't have the luxury of badges and lawyers and public platforms, Marcus replied. I'm giving her the chance because I can. Because refusing might cost me more than it costs her. But don't mistake mercy for forgiveness. She'll have to earn that. Richard nodded, understanding. Extended his hand. Marcus shook it briefly. Then Richard followed his sister and niece back across the street, leaving Marcus and Maya standing in the center of their wedding, surrounded by witnesses. Jerome raised his champagne glass. To Marcus and Maya, to love that survives despite everything trying to kill it. To joy as resistance. The crowd echoed, to joy as resistance. Glasses clinked. Laughter returned, tentative but growing. The DJ played something celebratory. Maya pulled Marcus into a kiss that tasted like champagne and salt and victory, that felt more like survival. His mother approached, placed something in his hand. His father's old security badge. She'd been carrying it in her purse, Marcus realized. Waiting for the right moment. He's here, she whispered. He sees what you did. He's so proud. Marcus closed his fingers around the badge. 2 generations of trying to prove worth, of excellence as armor, of believing the system could work if you just navigated it perfectly. Today had proven both the impossibility and necessity of that belief. The sun began its descent, painting everything gold. The wedding continued, wounded but alive. They cut the cake, made toasts, danced until the string lights flickered on overhead, transforming the backyard into something magical, despite everything. Carol's curtains stayed closed, but Marcus could feel her watching, could feel the weight of her attention, her shame, her fear of consequences. Whether it would change her or just make her more careful about hiding her prejudice remained to be seen. But tonight, in this moment, Marcus chose to believe in the possibility of transformation. Not because he was naive, because he had to. Because without that belief, the fight became impossible. Maya leaned against him as the last dance began. We did it, she whispered. We got married. Despite everything, we got married. We did, Marcus agreed, and meant it. This wasn't the wedding they'd planned, but it was the wedding they'd survived. And sometimes survival was its own kind of victory. The guests departed slowly, offering hugs and solidarity and promises to check in tomorrow. The caterers packed up. The DJ loaded equipment. The backyard emptied until only Marcus and Maya remained, standing among the remnants of celebration. Maya's dress glowed in the string lights. Marcus's tuxedo jacket hung over a chair. They swayed together to music only they could hear, exhausted but still standing. Tell me something true, Maya whispered. It was their ritual, borrowed from her grandmother. When the world felt overwhelming, when lies and performance accumulated, they asked each other for truth. Marcus thought carefully. I'm angry, he said finally, at Carol for what she did, at the system that enabled it, at myself for thinking we could escape it. But mostly, he paused, mostly I'm tired. So tired of having to prove we're human, that we deserve joy, that our celebration isn't a crime. Maya nodded against his chest. Me too, and also I'm grateful that you had your badge, that we had witnesses, that we survived this intact. She pulled back to look at him. So many people don't get that. Don't survive the moment when someone decides they're suspicious. The truth of that settled heavy between them. How differently this could have ended. How many times it had ended differently for other people. For Breonna Taylor shot in her home. For Philando Castile, killed during a traffic stop despite compliance. For Botham Jean murdered in his own apartment. For every black person whose joy or rest or mere existence was criminalized and punished. We're going to tell this story, Maya said. Not to shame Carol, to warn others, to show people what racial profiling looks like when it's dressed up as concern, when it's weaponized through 911 calls, when it interrupts weddings and birthday parties and everyday life. Marcus nodded. And we're going to keep celebrating, keep existing, keep refusing to shrink ourselves to make white people comfortable. Exactly, Maya agreed. We're going to live so fully, so loudly, so joyfully, that they have no choice but to see us as human. And when they still don't, when the Carol Brennans of the world still call the cops, we're going to document it, fight it, demand consequences. They stood in silence, letting the truth settle. This was their life now. In this house, in this neighborhood, carrying the weight of representation and resistance. It wasn't fair, wasn't what they'd signed up for. But it was real. A light flickered on across the street. Carol's living room, visible through sheer curtains. Marcus saw her sitting on a couch, head in her hands. Sarah beside her, talking. Richard pacing. The reckoning continuing in private. Do you think she'll change? Maya asked. Marcus considered. I think she'll learn to be more careful. Whether that translates to actual growth? He shrugged. Time will tell. But at least this time there were consequences. At least her family refused to enable her. That's something. The light went out. The neighborhood returned to darkness, interrupted only by streetlights and stars. Marcus pulled Maya closer, breathing in the scent of her perfume mixed with the remnants of their wedding. I love you, he said. Thank you for surviving this day with me. I love you too, Maya replied. And thank you for standing up, for not letting her steal everything, for choosing to keep celebrating despite her best efforts. They stayed there, swaying in the empty backyard, until exhaustion finally drove them inside. Tomorrow would bring police reports and newspaper articles and difficult conversations. Tomorrow they'd start the work of ensuring Carol followed through on her commitments. Tomorrow the fight would continue, but tonight they were just Marcus and Maya, newlyweds, survivors. Two people who'd gotten married despite everything, who'd reclaimed their joy despite someone trying to criminalize it, who'd proven once again that love and resilience could coexist with rage and grief. Marcus locked the door behind them, turned off the string lights, took his wife's hand and led her upstairs to begin their married life. And across the street, behind closed curtains, Carol Brennan sat with her shame, finally beginning to understand the cost of assumptions, the weight of prejudice, and the reality that her neighbors were not threats or criminals but humans who deserved the same peace and joy she'd always taken for granted. Whether that understanding would transform her remained to be seen. But Marcus had planted the seed, had made it impossible for her to pretend ignorance, had shown her and everyone watching that racial profiling had consequences, that silence wasn't an option, that joy could survive attempted theft. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was a start, and sometimes starts were all you got.